The mountain lion's eyes locked onto hers. Sarah Mitchell's blood turned to ice. Those golden eyes, and she knew them. 14 years ago, she had saved this creature's life, pulling a steel trap from its mangled paw in these same Colorado mountains. She never expected to see it again. Now the massive cougar stood 15 feet away, blocking the trail. But something felt wrong. This wasn't a threat. The animal's posture screamed desperation. It let out a guttural sound that seemed almost like pleading, then turned sharply and stared back at Sarah before taking deliberate steps into the dense forest. Every survival instinct Sarah possessed screamed danger. Following a wild mountain lion into the wilderness violated every rule she'd learned as a wildlife veterinarian. But this animal remembered her. After 14 years, it remembered her scent, her face, the mercy she had shown. And now it was leading her somewhere, with unmistakable urgency. Sarah's heart hammered as she made a choice that would change everything. She followed. The cougar moved with purpose through the morning mist, occasionally glancing back to ensure Sarah kept pace. They were heading deeper into territory she barely recognized. The question that terrified and electrified her was brutal in its simplicity. What could possibly make an apex predator seek out a human after all these years? What did this magnificent creature need so desperately that it would risk everything to find her? The memory exploded through Sarah's mind as she climbed over fallen timber. January 14 years ago. She was 26, fresh from veterinary school, working her first brutal season with Colorado Wildlife Services. The emergency call came at dawn. Hikers reported a young mountain lion dragging itself through deep snow, leaving a blood trail that looked like red paint against white canvas. Sarah reached the coordinates and found the cat wedged between boulders, its right front paw clamped in, an illegal steel trap. The jaws had been locked there for days. Infection had turned the tissue black. The animal was fading fast. Every protocol demanded she wait for backup, sedate from distance, follow procedure. But when Sarah looked into those dimming amber eyes, something shifted in her chest. She made a decision that nearly destroyed her career. Working alone, whispering softly, she approached with bolt cutters in trembling hands. The cougar's ears flattened against its skull, but exhaustion had stolen its fight. Sarah worked inches from jaws that could crush bone, her fingers numb from cold and adrenaline. The trap released with a metallic snap. The cougar pulled its ruined paw close, locked eyes with Sarah for one eternal heartbeat, then limped into the trees. Sarah had cleaned the wound, injected antibiotics, given it a chance. Her supervisors threatened termination. But standing here now, following that same animal through the forest, Sarah knew she'd make that choice again. She'd always make that choice. They'd been climbing for 35 minutes. Sarah's radio sat useless in her truck. Her phone showed zero signal. She was violating every safety protocol in existence. Yet something primal pulled her forward. The mountain lion maintained exactly 20 feet of distance, a deliberate space that felt like trust made visible. They navigated over moss-covered logs, pushed through stands of aspen and pine so thick the sunlight barely penetrated. The cat moved like it had walked this exact path 1,000 times before. Sarah's mind spun through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. Injured again? Sick? Trapped? Why come to her specifically after 14 years? The forest shifted. The ground became jagged rock, sloping upward toward massive boulders that formed a natural cave system. The temperature dropped as they climbed higher. The mountain lion stopped at the largest cave entrance, turned to face Sarah directly, and made that desperate sound again, louder this time. Then it vanished into darkness. Sarah stood at the threshold, flashlight in hand, her entire body vibrating with conflicting impulses. She thought about her 5-year-old daughter Emma waiting at home. She thought about the hundreds of ways this could go catastrophically wrong. But she also thought about trust, about the mysterious language that exists between species, about why this magnificent predator had traveled miles to find the one human who'd shown it mercy. Sarah stepped into the cave. The darkness swallowed her whole. Sarah's flashlight beam cut through the shadows. The cave opened into a chamber, and the smell hit her like a physical force, wild musk mixed with something that made her veterinary instincts scream alarm. There, pressed against the far rock wall, she saw them. 3 mountain lion cubs, maybe 8 weeks old, huddled together, but they weren't moving right. 2 lay motionless except for shallow, labored breathing. The third kept trying to stand but collapsed every few seconds, its tiny legs buckling. The mother mountain lion sat beside her babies, her massive head lowered in what looked devastatingly like grief. Sarah understood everything in that moment. These cubs were dying, and their mother had done something that defied nature itself. She had remembered the human who showed her kindness 14 years ago, tracked her down, and led her here to save her children. Sarah's hands were already moving, pulling her emergency kit from her backpack. She never hiked these mountains. Without basic supplies, thermometer, stethoscope, antibiotics, IV fluids. As she approached the cubs, the mother cougar's entire body tensed, muscles coiling like springs. But she didn't attack. She watched as Sarah knelt beside the first cub, checking its eyes, examining its gums. Severe dehydration, probable sepsis. Without immediate intervention, these babies had maybe 18 hours left. With a 140-pound predator watching her every move, Sarah began the most critical veterinary work of her entire life. One wrong move could end everything. Sarah's fingers moved with surgical precision, but her pulse thundered in her ears. She was treating a dying mountain lion cub while its mother sat 6 feet away, close enough to reach her in one leap. One cry of pain from the baby, one sign of distress, and maternal instinct could override everything else. The first cub barely responded to fluids. Its body was limp and cold. She found the problem quickly. Umbilical infection, bacteria spreading like wildfire. The second cub showed identical symptoms. The third, still fighting, was stronger but declining fast. Every minute counted. Sarah made a decision that terrified her. These cubs needed more than emergency field care. They needed her clinic. She looked at the mother mountain lion and spoke aloud, her voice steady despite the madness. She explained what needed to happen, knowing the words meant nothing but hoping something deeper might connect. Then Sarah did something that shattered every wildlife rule ever written. She carefully picked up the weakest cub. The mother's eyes went wide, her body coiled. Sarah froze completely. 3 seconds felt like 3 hours. Then the mother mountain lion stepped forward, sniffed her cub in Sarah's arms, and made a sound that wasn't a growl. It was permission. It was trust. It was a mother choosing to believe. Sarah fashioned a carrier from her jacket and emergency blanket, creating a sling that held all 3 cubs against her chest. She could feel their hearts beating, rapid and weak. The mother watched everything, tail flicking with agitation, but making no move to interfere. When Sarah started toward the cave entrance, something extraordinary happened. The cougar followed, not stalking, not threatening, following, like a parent trailing an ambulance carrying her children. The hike back was brutal. Sarah moved as fast as she dared, whispering to the cubs, monitoring their breathing. 5 minutes into the descent, the weakest cub stopped breathing. Sarah stopped, cleared its airway, rubbed its chest. 10 seconds, 15, until it gasped again. Behind her, the mother made a sound that could only be described as anguish. They kept moving. 20 minutes from the trailhead, she heard voices ahead, hikers. Her heart froze. If they saw a woman carrying cubs with a lion following, panic would erupt. Someone could shoot. Sarah made eye contact with the mother and lifted a hand. The cougar slipped into the tree line, crouching in tall grass. She understood. Sarah reached her truck, loaded the cubs, and drove away, watching that golden silhouette fade in her mirror until distance erased it. Sarah's clinic, Sunday, empty, silent. She had the space to herself, which was either a blessing or meant no witnesses if things went wrong. She worked non-stop, blood cultures, IV antibiotics, heated fluids, nutrition support. The cubs were 7 to 8 weeks old, still helpless. The infection was E. coli, likely from contaminated prey, fatal without treatment. By nightfall, faint signs of hope appeared. One cub's temperature normalized, another began breathing more evenly. By 11 p.m., the strongest cub tried to stand, shaky but alive. Sarah stayed all night, checking vitals every hour. At 2 a.m., exhaustion dragged her into a shallow sleep. At 5:47 a.m., a sound shattered the silence. From outside the clinic came the unmistakable call of a mountain lion. The mother had followed. Somehow across miles of terrain and through a town of 12,000 people, that magnificent creature had tracked her cubs. Sarah stood on trembling legs, walked to the window, and saw her, sitting in, the pale dawn light still as stone, the cougar who remembered, who trusted, who refused to abandon her children. Now came the impossible part. Sarah knew this could destroy her career, but every instinct screamed it was right. She called her mentor, Dr. Patricia Vega, and Marcus Chen, a National Geographic photographer. She needed witnesses. By 8 a.m. they arrived. Their skepticism vanished when they saw the mother mountain lion waiting in the parking lot, patient as stone. The cubs were stronger, eyes open, mewing for food. Sarah prepared bottles with formula and electrolytes, feeding each one while explaining her plan. It violated every rule, but it was the only ethical path forward. With cameras rolling, Sarah carried the pet carrier outside, placing it 20 feet away. She opened the door, then stepped back. The mother rose in one fluid motion, approached slowly, sniffed the air, and reached inside with one massive paw. Gently, impossibly gently, she pulled out the first cub. A deep, rumbling purr, half growl, half cry, filled the air. Pure relief made sound. One by one, she lifted her babies, licking their faces, checking them with a mother's intensity. Marcus's camera captured everything. This was the reunion that shouldn't exist. What happened next made Marcus lower his camera in disbelief. After checking her cubs, the mother looked directly at Sarah. Then she did something no one could explain. She picked up the weakest cub, the one that had stopped breathing on the trail, and walked forward. Dr. Vega grabbed Sarah's arm, but she gently pulled free. The cougar stopped 3 feet away, close enough to smell her breath. She set the cub down and nudged it towards Sarah. The message was clear. This one still needs you. Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she picked up the tiny cub. The mother sat back, watching calmly as Sarah examined it and began feeding it a bottle. For 22 minutes, this impossible scene unfolded. A wild predator trusting a human with her most precious life. When the cub finished eating, Sarah placed it back beside its siblings. She left 3 bottles and antibiotic doses mixed with raw meat. Somehow she knew the mother would understand. Then she did the hardest thing of all. She let them go. The mother mountain lion gathered her cubs close. She picked up the strongest one in her jaws, then looked back one last time. In that gaze, Sarah saw everything that mattered: recognition, gratitude, trust. Then the cougar turned and disappeared into the forest, her cubs stumbling behind her. Marcus had captured every second. Within 48 hours, the footage circled the globe. Scientists debated memory versus instinct. News outlets called it miraculous. But Sarah knew the truth. She had witnessed something far deeper, proof that compassion can bridge species and that mercy never fades. 3 weeks later, trail cameras showed the mother and her cubs thriving, playing in the sun near their den. Years later, Sarah told the story to her daughter Emma, now a veterinary student. She always ended with the same words: kindness creates echoes that ripple through time in ways we cannot predict. Sometimes those echoes return when we least expect them, proving that compassion is never wasted. This is what it means to be truly alive.